A bitter young CEO yells at a humble cleaner in his company, humiliating her in front of other employees. His 7-year-old daughter witnesses the whole scene and makes a courageous decision no one expected. She marches to his office and confronts him directly. "Never yell at my mother like that again." What happens next leaves all the employees completely shocked. The silence on the 47th floor of the Legacy Tower was a tapestry woven with threads of power and ambition. Arthur Maxwell, 28 years old, felt the weight of that silence like a cloak on his shoulders. From his Italian leather chair, he watched the city sprawl below, a chessboard of lights and shadows where he was the king of an empire he never wanted. The chair, the office, the name etched on the frosted glass door. It was all part of an inheritance left by a father who had departed too soon, taking the warmth with him and leaving behind only the cold architecture of business. Arthur had become a master at transforming his pain into an armor of indifference. His eyes, a blue so deep they seemed to hold storms, scanned the spreadsheets on his monitor. Profit, assets, yield. These were safe words, numbers that neither lied nor abandoned him. Emotions, he had learned the hard way, were dangerous liabilities on life's balance sheet. Outside his sanctuary of glass and steel, life pulsed differently. Elena Torres, her face etched with worries that stretched far beyond stock charts, pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway. The scent of wax and disinfectant was her contribution to that universe of expensive cologne and gourmet coffee. Beside her, a small hand gripped the hem of her uniform. Lily, her 7-year-old daughter, was a spot of color and innocence in the monochromatic scene. Her hair, tied in 2 braids, bounced with every step, and her curious eyes absorbed every detail. The plush carpets, the abstract wall art, the low hum of the computers. Staying with her grandmother was no longer an option, and the money barely covered the rent, let alone a decent sitter. Bringing her to work was a risk. A minor breach of protocol Elena prayed no one would notice, especially the young and feared Mr. Maxwell. While her mother polished the brushed steel handrail, Lily momentarily slipped away. She approached the immense glass wall separating the corridor from the main office. The man inside looked like a giant on his throne. He wasn't smiling. His face was a mask of concentration, almost of anger. Lily didn't understand equity or investments, but she understood sadness. This man, surrounded by so much wealth, looked like the saddest person she had ever seen. With the tip of her finger in a small smudge of dust her mother hadn't reached yet, she drew a smiling sun, a tiny gesture, a secret between her and the cold glass. Her mother pulled her gently away, her heart tightening with fear. "Don't touch anything, sweetie. We need to be invisible." Inside the office, Arthur felt a wave of irritation swell. The numbers weren't aligning. A crucial investment was at risk, and the pressure from the board felt like a knot in his throat. He stood up, pacing the floor, the contained energy in his body seeking a release valve. That was when his eyes fixed on the glass wall. Not the city view, but the surface itself. There was a mark, an imperfection, a spot of dust with a foolish, childish drawing. His mind, already overloaded, interpreted it not as an innocent gesture, but as a symbol of disorder, of lack of control. In the reflection, he saw the custodian and the child quickly moving away down the hall. The irritation found its target. That oversight, that inappropriate presence in his perfectly orchestrated world was the final straw. His jaw clenched, and a cutting coldness settled in his gaze. This situation could not continue. Someone was going to pay for that mess. The glass door opened with a controlled hiss, but the fury propelling Arthur Maxwell was anything but contained. He marched into the hallway, the sound of his expensive shoes echoing on the polished marble like hammer blows. His eyes swept the floor, ignoring employees who quickly averted their gazes or dove into their papers, sensing the drop in temperature. He spotted Elena at the end of the hall, her back to him, methodically wiping down a window frame. Little Lily was next to her, arranging colorful cleaning cloths back into the cart with childish seriousness. They were a portrait of domesticity and calm that, to Arthur's troubled mind, seemed like an affront. He felt the pressure of a multi-million-dollar business on his back, the ghost of his father judging every decision, every dip in the company's stock, and all he could see was disorder, imperfection. "Ma'am," his voice sliced through the air, cold and sharp. Eleanor spun around with a jump, the cloth still in her hand. The frightened smile on her face withered when she saw her boss's dark expression. Lily hid behind her mother's legs, peeking at the tall, angry man. Arthur pointed toward his office wall, a considerable distance away. "That, on my window. What is that?" Elena squinted, confused. She couldn't see anything from where she stood. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't—" "Dust. That's what it is, a mark of filth on the CEO's window. Is this the standard of excellence this company represents?" His voice rose, attracting the discreet attention of a secretary and a passing junior executive. Elena felt her face burn. Humiliation was a hot ember rising in her throat. "Sir, I apologize profoundly. I will clean it immediately. It was an oversight. It won't happen again." But Arthur wasn't looking for a solution. He was looking for release from the pressure in his chest. And Elena's vulnerability was the perfect target. "An oversight. Your carelessness costs this company its image, an image that supports your paycheck." He stepped closer, his shadow enveloping mother and daughter. Elena instinctively placed a protective hand on Lily's head, as if she could shield her from his words. "I understand, sir. I'm very sorry." Arthur ignored her, his rage now fully unleashed. "I don't pay for excuses. I pay for results. Next time, clean it right or find another job." The phrase hung in the air, brutal and definitive. Elena lowered her head, her chin trembling. The tears she refused to shed weighed heavily on her lashes. "Yes, sir," she whispered to the floor. In that moment, she only wanted to disappear. From behind her mother, Lily saw everything. She saw her mother's shoulders slump, saw the head that usually held itself with pride bow in shame. She didn't understand the words about image or paycheck, but she perfectly understood the cruel tone. She saw the pain on the face of the woman who was her entire world. Arthur, feeling an empty satisfaction from having reaffirmed his authority, turned his back and returned to his office, closing the door behind him. The silence he left was heavier than his shouts. Eleanor remained motionless for a long moment, breathing deeply not to break down in front of her daughter. But when she looked down, she didn't find the frightened face she expected. Lily's eyes held no fear. They were fixed on the door of the sad giant's office, and in them burned a small, fierce flame of pure indignation. Her tiny hand, previously occupied with the cloths, closed into a determined fist. For a moment, Eleanor's world was reduced to the low hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of her own heart. She bent down, intending to whisper words of comfort to Lily, to tell her everything would be fine, that Mommy was strong. But the small hand holding hers pulled away. With a determination that seemed too large for her tiny body, Lily took one step forward, then another. Her target was the imposing glass door of Mr. Maxwell's office. "Lily, no! Come back here, sweetie!" Elena hissed, panic freezing her veins. It was too late. Lily didn't run. She marched. Her small shoes barely made a sound on the plush carpet, but every step was a declaration of war. She reached the heavy door and, using all her strength, pushed it open. The door swung wide, revealing the sanctuary of the man who had hurt her mother. Arthur was back at his desk, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, trying to force his mind to concentrate again on cash flow and investment reports. The sound of the door opening irritated him. He looked up, ready to reprimand whoever had dared interrupt him without knocking. but the words died in his throat. Standing in the doorway of his vast office was not a senior executive or his personal assistant, but the child, the custodian's daughter. For a second, his brain refused to process the scene. The girl stared at him, her dark eyes serious, and then walked toward the front of his desk. The distance seemed immense. The mahogany desk, an insurmountable barrier between their worlds. But she didn't stop. Lily paused a few feet from him, small enough that the desk surface was at shoulder height. She raised her arm and pointed an accusing finger directly at the face of the most powerful man she had ever known. The voice that came out of her was not loud, but it was clear and firm, cutting the oppressive silence of the office like crystal. "Don't you ever yell at my mommy like that again?" The phrase, so simple and direct, hit Arthur with the force of a punch. No one in his entire adult life had ever addressed him that way. Subordinates trembled, competitors measured their words, board members used euphemisms. No one had ever confronted him with such pure, unarmed truth. He looked at the small finger pointed in his direction, then at the girl's face, a mixture of defiance and childlike righteousness. The rage he felt before dissipated, replaced by a profound shock, a perplexity that left him speechless. The armor he had built around his heart, forged with the pain of loss and polished with the hardness of business, cracked. In that instant, he was not the multimillionaire CEO, the heir to a great fortune. He was just a man being judged through the eyes of a child. The world seemed to stop. The hum of the computers, the traffic outside, all vanished. There was only the silence between him and the girl, but the silence was about to be shattered. Down the hall, the sound of rushing footsteps and a voice choked with panic approached. Elena, her face pale with terror, emerged in the open doorway, her hands outstretched as if she could reverse time. "Mr. Maxwell, for God's sake, forgive me. She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's doing." Her desperate eyes pleaded, while other employees, drawn by the commotion, began to gather discreetly in the corridor, witnessing the unbelievable scene. Elena's rushed entry broke the spell that had fallen over the office. The panic in her voice was palpable, a sharp contrast to her daughter's challenging calm. "Lily, come here right now. Apologize to Mr. Maxwell," she pleaded, her body shaking. She rushed to her daughter's side, trying to pull her arm, but Lily stood firm, her finger still aimed at Arthur. The murmur in the hall increased. Curious, shocked faces peered through the doorway, turning a private confrontation into a public spectacle. Elena's humiliation intensified, now mixed with overwhelming fear for the security of her job, her only source of income. She turned to Arthur, desperation etched on her face. "Sir, please forgive me. I will take her away. This will never happen again. I beg you, don't fire me." She was on the verge of kneeling, her dignity draining away under the weight of fear. Arthur watched the scene, his brain still trying to keep up with the rapid succession of events. The image of the woman bending, ready to beg on the floor of his office, struck him in an unexpected way. The anger he had felt, the power he had wielded, suddenly felt small and shameful. It was as if a mirror had been raised, and the reflection he saw was of a cruel man, a bully who used his power and capital to crush the vulnerable. The memory of his father echoed in his mind, not the ruthless businessman father, but the father who, in rare moments of tenderness, had taught him about honor. A real man doesn't measure his strength by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those who cannot fight back, he had once said. For years, Arthur had forgotten that lesson. His eyes moved from the terrified mother to the defiant daughter. Lily's finger finally lowered, but her gaze remained firm, an anchor of conviction in a sea of chaos. And in that look, Arthur saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: purity, unwavering integrity. That little girl wasn't defending an abstract principle. She was defending her mother, her universe. The crack in his armor deepened. He felt exposed, not as a CEO whose authority was questioned, but as a man whose humanity was put in check. Slowly, he stood up. The movement made Elena flinch, expecting the final blow. The spectators in the corridor held their breath, but Arthur did not walk around the desk to expel them. Instead, he remained in his place, looked directly at Lily, and did something no one in that building ever thought possible. He extended his hand, not in a gesture of power, but of entreaty. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and hoarse, stripped of all his usual arrogance. "Please," he said, the words sounding strange in his own mouth. "I was wrong. I apologize." The silence that followed Arthur's words was deeper and more shocking than the initial confrontation. If the CEO's wrath was a thunder expected on stormy days, his apology was a blue lightning flash in a clear sky. The crowd in the corridor was stunned, jaws dropped. Cell phones, which were beginning to appear discreetly to record the drama, were lowered in confusion. Mr. Maxwell, the ice tyrant, the man whose net worth was as vast as his impatience, was asking for forgiveness to a child. Elena looked from her daughter to the extended hand of her boss, her mind refusing to believe what her ears had heard. She expected screams, termination, maybe even security guards, but not this, never this. Lily, however, did not share the adult's shock. She looked at the large, pale hand extended toward her. It wasn't a threatening hand now. It was just a hand. She then raised her eyes to the man's face. The anger had vanished. What remained was something she couldn't name, a mixture of surprise, regret, and a vulnerability she had already sensed before, through the glass. This was the sad man again. Her childish indignation, so simple and direct, began to dissolve, replaced by an equally pure empathy. She did not shake his hand. Instead, she gave a small nod, solemn like a judge delivering a sentence. "It's okay, but don't do it again." Her acceptance was as unconditional as her accusation, and it completely disarmed Arthur. He lowered his hand, feeling strangely light, a weight he didn't even know he was carrying. The weight of his own bitterness seemed to lessen for an instant. His eyes met Elena's, and for the first time he truly saw her, not as the custodian, the anonymous employee, but as a woman, a mother, who had endured his cruelty with silent dignity. Shame hit him again, stronger this time. "Ma'am," he began, his voice still uncertain, I apologize to you too. My behavior was unacceptable. There are no excuses for the way I treated you." Elena, still stunned, could only stammer, "No, sir, it's fine. It was my fault." "No," he interrupted her, with a firmness that wasn't anger, but conviction. "It was not. The fault was entirely mine." He then turned to the curious faces in the corridor. His old mask of coldness returned for a moment, not to intimidate but to command. "The show is over. Get back to work." His voice had its usual authority, and the order was obeyed instantly. The corridor emptied, but the murmur of whispered conversations would remain for the rest of the day. Arthur turned back to Eleanor and Lily. "Please, come inside and close the door," he said softly. Eleanor hesitated, fear still battling confusion. But the look in his eyes made her obey. She guided Lily into the vast office and closed the door, leaving them alone with the man who, in a matter of minutes, had completely shaken her world. The atmosphere was tense, laden with unspoken questions. Arthur felt that his apology was not enough. That wound needed more than words to heal. He looked at the girl, who was now examining a crystal globe in a corner, and an idea, impulsive and unprecedented, began to form in his mind. The office, which previously seemed like a battlefield, was now immersed in an uncomfortable quietness. Arthur sat on the edge of his desk, a gesture that broke the formal barrier between him and Elena, who remained standing near the door, holding Lily's hand tightly. He didn't know where to start. Years of training in aggressive negotiations and business acquisition strategies hadn't prepared him for this moment. Talking about dividends and cash flow was easy. Talking about feelings was like trying to read an unknown language. He watched Lily, who was now tracing the outline of Brazil on the crystal globe with her finger. The naturalness with which she explored her surroundings contrasted with her mother's rigidity and his own internal anxiety. "Elena," he began, testing her name out loud for the first time. "I would like to understand. Why is she here with you?" The question wasn't an accusation, but genuinely curious. Elena stiffened, interpreting the question as the prelude to a reprimand. "My mother, who was watching her, fell ill. I don't have money for daycare or a sitter, sir. I know it's against the rules, but I had no choice. I am so sorry." The confession came out rushed, a plea for clemency. Arthur shook his head. "No, I am not criticizing. I just didn't know." He paused, the enormity of the distance between his life and hers becoming painfully clear. He worried about the profitability of his investment funds. She worried about ensuring her daughter was safe while she earned enough to survive. The vulnerability in Arthur's apology, followed by that question, began to disarm Elena. She looked at the man, who had always seemed more like a force of nature than a person, and saw the confusion in his eyes. She saw a man grappling with something within himself. "She's a good girl," Elena added, her voice a little firmer. "She doesn't touch anything. Usually, she just sits quietly reading or drawing." Arthur looked at Lily, who was now trying to spin the globe. "I noticed," he said. A silence settled again, but this time, less tense. It was Lily who broke it. "Are you very rich?" she asked suddenly, turning to him with the brutal honesty of children. The question caught Arthur and Elena by surprise. Elena blushed, ready to scold her daughter, but Arthur raised his hand, a small smile appearing in the corner of his lips for the first time that day. "Yes, I think so," he replied. "Do you have a lot of money?" Lily continued her investigation. "Yes, I do." "Then why are you so sad?" The final question was a dart aimed squarely at the heart of Arthur's fortress. He had no answer. The smile vanished, replaced by an expression of pure perplexity. The child saw through him, through his fortune, his power, and perceived the naked truth of his existence. He was a sad man. The realization, coming from such an innocent source, was more impactful than any analysis from his expensive therapists. In that moment, something fundamentally changed within Arthur. It was no longer just about apologizing for a fit of rage. It was about confronting the emptiness that his wealth and possessions failed to fill. He looked at Eleanor and Lily, two people who had so little in material terms, but whose connection was so strong and real. He felt a pang of something he barely recognized: envy. He needed to do more. He needed to repair not only the damage he had caused, but perhaps, in some way, begin to repair himself. He stood up, the decision made. "Elena, Lily, I would like to invite you for coffee, or maybe ice cream," he said, looking at Lily, "outside of here, as a formal apology." The proposal was so unexpected, so out of the ordinary, that Elena was speechless. She looked at the billionaire boss, then at her daughter, and realized that the courage of that small girl had unleashed an avalanche whose consequences she could not yet foresee. The following weekend was a blur of uncertainty for Elena. Arthur's offer, made in that cold office, seemed surreal, a fever dream from which she would soon wake up. She politely declined, inventing an excuse about having commitments, feeling that crossing that boundary between professional and personal was too dangerous. The work week resumed with a palpable tension. The looks from her colleagues were a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and pity. The story of the confrontation and the unprecedented apology spread like wildfire, making her a reluctant celebrity in the halls of legacy enterprises. Arthur, for his part, treated her with formal, distant courtesy, a nod when passing, which left her even more confused. He seemed to have returned to being the impenetrable boss, and she began to wonder if the incident in the office had been just a momentary lapse. The following Sunday, life returned to its normal rhythm. Eleanor lived in a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. A world of exposed brick and clotheslines in the windows, light years away from the glass and steel skyscrapers where she worked. The scent of freshly baked cinnamon swirl bread filled the tiny kitchen, while Lily, seated at the table, colored a drawing book. The doorbell rang, a rare sound at her door. Elena dried her hands on her apron and went to answer, expecting it to be the neighbor asking for a cup of sugar. When she opened the door, her heart stopped. There, standing in the worn hallway of her building, was Arthur Maxwell. He wasn't wearing his usual expensive suit, but jeans and a simple shirt, which somehow made him even more imposing in his simplicity. In his hands, he held a bouquet of flowers. They weren't extravagant red roses, but a delicate arrangement of daisies and sunflowers, flowers that seemed to belong more to that neighborhood than to his world. Arthur felt absurdly out of place. Getting her address required a discreet query to HR, an act that already made him feel like an intruder. Every step in that simple building, with the echo of children's laughter and the smell of home cooking, was a reminder of the distance between their worlds. He saw the surprise and panic in Elena's eyes and hurried to speak. "Elena, I apologize for showing up like this, unannounced. I felt that my apology at the office wasn't appropriate. It was public and put you in an uncomfortable position. I wanted to apologize properly to you." He extended the bouquet. The flowers were a truce, a request for peace. Eleanor looked at the flowers, then at his face. The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. There was no arrogance, just an almost juvenile nervousness. "Mummy, who is it?" Lily's voice sounded from the living room, and soon the girl appeared at the door, her eyes widening when she saw the sad man there. Her face lit up. "You came to visit us." Lily's innocence broke the tension. Elena, still stunned, took the flowers, the sweet perfume filling her senses. "Mr. Maxwell, you didn't have to. Please, call me Arthur," he said, and yes, I needed to. Eleanor finally stepped out of the doorway, inviting him in with a hesitant gesture. The apartment was small, but impeccably clean and welcoming. There were photos of Lily on every wall, and the simple furniture was covered with colorful crocheted throws. It was a home, something Arthur's vast, silent penthouse apartment never was. He sat on the modest couch, feeling like a giant in a dollhouse. Lily approached and offered him a piece of cinnamon swirl bread on a small plastic plate. Accepting it, Arthur knew that this moment was more real and significant than any billion-dollar deal he had ever closed. He was no longer in control. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare him. The news of Arthur's Sunday visit to Elena's home didn't need witnesses to spread. His own behavior on Monday was the confirmation. The bouquet he had brought, now divided into small vases that Elena discreetly spread across her cleaning cart, was like a beacon. But the most drastic change was in Arthur. He began to smile. They weren't wide, open smiles, but small twitches at the corners of his lips. Cordial nods, a good morning that didn't sound like an order. He started taking coffee breaks in the employees' break room, a place he previously avoided like the plague, generating an awkward silence whenever he entered. Employees, once accustomed to dodging his path, now found themselves divided. Some saw the change with relief and hope. Others, especially the older, more cynical executives, watched with suspicion. Richard Vance, VP of Operations and a man who saw himself as the true heir to the senior Maxwell legacy, was the leader of the skeptics. He saw Arthur's transformation not as a human awakening, but as a dangerous weakness. In a board meeting, the tension surfaced. Arthur was presenting a new employee wellness initiative, something unthinkable months prior. Richard interrupted him. "Arthur, with all due respect, this philanthropy is touching." But while we worry about our associates' happiness, the competition is sharpening its knives to cut into our market share. We need a leader focused on profit and expansion, not on flowers. The venom in his voice was subtle but clear. Several other directors nodded discreetly. Arthur felt the old instinct to attack, to crush insubordination with a cutting reply. But then he thought of Lily asking why he was so sad. He took a deep breath. "Richard, happy employees are productive employees. Wellness is not a liability. It is an investment in our greatest strength, our human capital. A leader focused only on short-term profit eventually ends up with no company to lead in the long term." The response was calm, rational, and disarmed Richard's aggression. But the seed of discord was planted. The board was fractured. Arthur's weakness, as Richard called it, became the main topic of whispered conversations during executive lunches. The news of his visit to a custodian's home, though the details were unknown, leaked and was distorted, painting him as an unstable, suggestible leader losing focus on his business. The second obstacle was not long in coming. In a crucial negotiation for the acquisition of a tech startup, the competing CEO used Arthur's new reputation against him. "We hear that Legacy Enterprises is undergoing a cultural shift, Arthur," the man said, with a shark-like grin. "We are looking for a partner with an aggressive vision. We're not sure if your new humanitarian philosophy aligns with our goals for exponential growth." It was a low blow, an attempt to destabilize him and force him to pay a higher price for the acquisition to prove he was still ruthless. Arthur felt the blood rush to his face. The conference room fell silent, everyone waiting for the explosion. He looked at his advisors, who stared at him anxiously. The temptation to revert to the old Arthur, the corporate predator, was immense. Proving them wrong, that he could still destroy anyone in his way, was an almost irresistible impulse. But the image of Elena offering him a glass of water in her humble kitchen, and of Lily with her drawing of a smiling sun, flashed in his mind. He was at a crossroads. Defend his new stance and risk losing a deal that would define his legacy, or yield and prove that deep down, nothing had changed. Arthur leaned back in his chair, the soft leather creaking under the contained tension in his body. He looked at the competing CEO, a man named Octavio, whose smug smile was an open invitation to war. The old Arthur would have accepted the challenge. He would have dissected Octavio's company, pointed out its financial weaknesses, its hidden liabilities, and publicly humiliated him before withdrawing his offer, leaving him in ruins. But the echo of Lily's voice still resonated in his mind. "Why are you so sad?" Victory at any cost had always left him with an ashy taste in his mouth. He took a deep breath, choosing a different path. "Octavio, you're right. We are undergoing a cultural shift. We've found that treating people with dignity is not only the right thing to do, it's good business. It generates loyalty, innovation, and an environment where the best ideas flourish. Our humanitarian philosophy is not a weakness. It is our new competitive advantage. If you are looking for a partner who sees employees as mere numbers on a spreadsheet, perhaps we truly are not the right choice for you." The calm, confident reply caught Octavio off guard. He expected a fight, not a lecture on business ethics. His bluff was disarmed. Arthur concluded the meeting firmly, maintaining his original offer without conceding a dime. He left the room, leaving behind a bewildered team and a competitor reconsidering his strategy. Although the deal was still uncertain, Arthur felt a wave of satisfaction that no hostile victory had ever given him. He was defining his own terms, not just in business, but in life. His transformation, however, continued to isolate him from his former allies and deepen his connection with the only people who seemed to understand him, Elena and Lily. He began to find small excuses to interact with them. He would leave a chocolate on Lily's small table, which she discreetly set up in a corner of the hallway, or a new storybook. One afternoon, he found Elena in the break room, her shoulders slumped with fatigue. "You look exhausted," he said softly. Elena jumped slightly, startled. "It's just the end of the day, sir. Arthur." The hesitation in using his first name was a constant reminder of the barrier between them. "I brought coffee," he said, offering her one of the 2 cups he held. "I thought you might need it." Eleanor accepted, the warmth of the cup heating her cold hands. "Thank you." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he replied. And the simple fact was so powerful it hung in the air between them. These small gestures, the exchange of shy glances and brief conversations, began to build a bridge over the abyss of their social and financial differences. Elena, who initially viewed his kindness with suspicion, began to see the man behind the multi-millionaire. She saw his loneliness, his struggle to reconnect with a humanity he had suppressed for so long, and her heart, cautious and wounded by past hardships, began to open. She found herself smiling when she thought of him, feeling a pang of warmth when she saw him in the hallway. They were dangerous feelings, feelings she didn't dare name, but which grew every day, watered by the unexpected nobility of his apologies and the genuine kindness of his actions. One night, while tucking Lily into bed, the girl asked, "Mommy, do you like the sad man?" Elena just stroked her hair, but in her heart, the silent answer both frightened and moved her. The growing proximity between Arthur and Elena did not go unnoticed, especially in the watchful eyes of Richard Vance. The VP saw every shared smile, every shared coffee, not as the beginning of an improbable romance, but as ammunition. His ambition was a hungry fire, and Arthur, in his new vulnerable phase, seemed like the perfect fuel. Richard saw himself as the true successor to the senior Maxwell, a man who understood that power is not built with kindness, but with ruthless force. Arthur's transformation was, to him, a betrayal of the company's legacy, an opportunity he couldn't waste. He began to act in the shadows, planting seeds of doubt among board members and key investors. He spoke about Arthur's lack of focus, his erratic decisions, and most venomously, his inappropriate distraction with a low-level employee. Richard's opportunity materialized concretely when he hired a private investigator to follow Arthur. The report he received in a brown envelope was even better than he expected. Photos of Arthur entering Eleanor's modest building, images of him pushing Lily on a swing set at the neighborhood park over the weekend, and most damning of all, a photo, taken from a distance, of the two laughing together at the door of her apartment, the warm light from inside creating an aura of intimacy. Richard smiled. It was exactly what he needed. He convened an unofficial meeting with two of the most conservative board members, shareholders who valued image and stability above all else. "Gentlemen," Richard began, spreading the photos across the polished conference table, "I fear for the health of our company and for the mental health of our CEO." He let the images speak for themselves. "This goes beyond a simple management change. It is reckless behavior, a relationship with a direct subordinate. From the cleaning staff, think of the scandal. Think of how our competitors would use this. Think of the drop in our stock price." He feigned grave concern, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. The seed of panic was planted. The fear of a scandal was more powerful than any earnings report. Richard then went for the final blow. He approached Arthur in his office at the end of an exhausting day. "Arthur, I need to speak to you." As a friend, the falseness in his voice was almost palpable. He tossed the envelope with the photos onto Arthur's desk. "What is this, Richard?" Arthur asked, tired. "It's your professional suicide," Richard replied, the mask of friendship dropping. "This is starting to circulate. The board is panicking. If this story leaks to the press, Legacy Enterprises becomes a laughingstock. Your leadership will be questioned. Our net worth will plummet. Arthur opened the envelope and his blood ran cold. The invasion of privacy enraged him, but the fear of what this could cause Elena terrified him. "What do you want, Richard?" "I want to save the company your father built," Richard said, with false nobility. "Distance yourself from her. Go back to being the leader we all respect. Or I will be forced to present a motion to the board to remove you for inappropriate behavior and jeopardizing company assets. The choice is yours." The threat hung in the air, cold and brutal. Protecting the woman who was teaching him how to live would mean losing the empire that was his inheritance and his burden. Richard's threat left a bitter taste of poison in Arthur's mouth. He sat in his office for hours after the VP left. The photos scattered on the desk like shards of a future he had barely begun to build. The initial rage gave way to a chilling fear. It wasn't fear of losing the company. In the past few days, he had started to realize that the CEO title was more of a gilded cage than a throne. His fear was for Elena. He had dragged her into the center of a corporate hurricane, exposing her to cruel scrutiny she did not deserve. Richard's threat wasn't just about his position. It was about Elena's life, her job, her reputation. The story, if leaked, would paint her as an opportunist, and Lily would forever be the daughter of the custodian who got involved with the boss. The injustice of the situation suffocated him. The next day, a fog of tension covered the executive floor. Arthur avoided Elena, his heart tightening each time he saw her from afar. The distance was a knife in his chest, but he believed it was the only way to protect her. Elena felt the change immediately. The smiles vanished. The casual encounters in the break room ceased. Arthur reverted to a distant, somber figure, his eyes passing over her as if she were invisible. For Elena, the rejection was a silent, devastating blow. She blamed herself. Had she misinterpreted his kindness? Had she been foolish to allow her heart to open to an impossible fantasy? Her colleagues, noticing the shift, returned to treating her with a mixture of pity and a subtle, "I told you so." The pressure became unbearable. She felt the stares, heard the whispers. The joy she had found in those small moments of connection was replaced by a consuming shame. By the end of the week, tormented by pain and the conviction that her presence was somehow harming Arthur, Elena made a drastic decision. With trembling hands, she drafted a letter of resignation. It was the only thing she felt she could do to protect him, to end the rumors and return to him the life he had before her. And Lily walked into his office. She went to Arthur's assistant's desk, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Please deliver this to Mr. Maxwell," she said, her voice low and firm, hiding the storm of emotions raging inside her. At the same time, in the corporate data underground, something unexpected was happening. The negotiation with the tech startup, which Arthur had conducted with his new philosophy, had surprisingly advanced. The CEO, Octavio, impressed by Arthur's integrity, agreed to the terms. During the due diligence process, Arthur's team, now encouraged to be more thorough and collaborative, discovered an anomaly: a series of small, seemingly insignificant financial transactions leaving legacy enterprises for shell accounts linked to one of its main competitors. They were micro-sabotages, information leaks that had been undermining the company from within for months. Following the digital trail, Arthur's IT chief, a young genius who felt newly empowered by the company's new culture, made the final connection. The origin point of all the leaks was not an external hacker. It was the computer of the vice president, Richard Vance. The smokescreen Richard had created around Arthur's behavior was to hide his own betrayal. The digital report landed on Arthur's desk like a time bomb. Every line of code, every transaction record, painted an irrefutable portrait of Richard's treason. The sabotage was deep, systematic, designed to weaken the company slowly, making Arthur look like an incompetent leader and paving the way for Richard to take control. likely with the support of the competitor he was leaking information to. The revelation hit Arthur with the force of a punch. Richard's threat, the fabricated scandal, all of it was nothing more than a distraction to cover up his own corporate crimes. The rage he felt was primal, a white fire that burned away all his confusion and fear. But the rage was quickly followed by a cutting clarity. Richard had underestimated the power of the change he himself despised. It was the culture of respect and collaboration, the very thing Richard labeled as weakness, that allowed his team to discover the truth. At the exact moment Arthur absorbed the magnitude of the betrayal, his assistant walked in, her face pale. "Mr. Maxwell, sorry to interrupt, but the board has called an emergency meeting in 10 minutes, and this arrived for you." She placed the white envelope on the desk, next to the incriminating documents. It was Elena's resignation letter. Arthur picked up the envelope, his heart sinking. He tore it open and read the simple, dignified words. Every sentence was a stab to his conscience. She was sacrificing herself for him, to protect him from a threat he, out of cowardice, hadn't helped her face. She thought she was the problem, when in fact she and Lily had been the solution to everything. He stood up, the decision forged in the fire of that revelation. He held the IT report in one hand and Elena's resignation letter in the other. They were symbols of everything at stake, his legacy and his future. He walked toward the boardroom, each step echoing with renewed purpose. Passing through the hallway, he saw Elena, who had already changed out of her uniform into simple clothes, holding Lily's hand, ready to leave the building for the last time. Their eyes met through the glass. The pain and resignation in Elena's gaze were almost unbearable. Lily looked at him, not with the defiance of before, but with a confused sadness, as if she didn't understand why the sad man had returned to being sad. Arthur gave Elena a brief nod, a silent promise she couldn't comprehend, and entered the meeting room. The atmosphere was glacial. The board members were seated, their faces grim. Richard was at the head of the table, in the seat that belonged to Arthur, the personification of smugness. "Arthur," Richard began with a tone of false sorrow, "we are here to discuss a delicate matter regarding your leadership and your compromised judgment." Arthur walked to the table and, instead of sitting, placed the two documents in the center of the polished table, the resignation letter and the investigation report. "Indeed, Richard, we are here to discuss compromised judgment and betrayal." He looked at each board member, his voice resonating with an authority they hadn't heard in a long time, an authority now tempered not by bitterness, but by conviction. "Today you have a choice to make. You can listen to the lies of a man who tried to blackmail me to cover up his own crimes, or you can help me save the soul of this company. But before you decide, there is something everyone needs to know about the woman this man tried to destroy." He was about to risk everything, not for the company or the inheritance, but for the honor of a custodian and the courage of her 7-year-old daughter. The silence in the boardroom was so thick it could be cut. Eyes turned from Arthur to Richard, whose face paled, the arrogance replaced by poorly concealed panic. Arthur didn't give him a chance to speak. With lethal calm, he detailed the IT investigation, projecting the irrefutable evidence onto the large screen. Encrypted emails, transfer records to offshore accounts linked to competitors, leaked strategic project data. The web of corruption Richard had woven in the shadows was exposed to the cold, relentless light of facts. The vice president, who for months had sabotaged the company while posing as the guardian of its legacy, was unmasked. His attempt to use Elena as a scapegoat revealed itself for what it was, a desperate act by a cornered traitor. After presenting the proof of sabotage, Arthur picked up Elena's resignation letter. His voice, previously hard and accusatory, softened. "This second document," he said, "is proof of my greatest failure in leadership. It is the resignation letter of Elena Torres." The woman Richard tried to use to blackmail me. She is resigning because she believed her presence was harming me. She was willing to sacrifice her livelihood for my sake, while the man sitting among you was willing to sacrifice this company for his own gain." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "In recent weeks, I changed, and that change scared some of you. But it was that change, this new culture of trust and respect, that allowed us to discover this betrayal. Elena and her daughter, Lily, were not my weakness. They were my awakening. They reminded me that our greatest asset is not in our stock portfolio or our properties. It is in our people." The board's resolution was swift and unanimous. Security was called, and Richard was escorted out of the building, his career in ruins, facing criminal charges. Arthur's first victory was won. He had saved the company. But the most important battle still awaited him. He left the boardroom and ran to the lobby. Elena and Lily were near the revolving door, about to leave. "Elena!" he called out. She turned, her eyes red from held-back tears. "Arthur, what happened?" "Stay," he said, the word charged with all the feeling he had been repressing. "Please, stay." He knelt in front of Lily. "Lily, I need you to forgive me again. I was a coward. I let a bad man scare me, and I almost lost the two most important people who walked into my life." Lily looked at her mother, then back at him, and gave a small smile. "It's okay. Grown-ups get scared too." The simplicity of her wisdom struck him again. Arthur stood up and looked at Elena. "I don't want you to stay as a custodian unless that's what you want. I want you to stay because I am becoming a better man with you around. The transformation everyone saw is not a phase. It is who I want to be, and I can't do that without you." The tears Elena had been holding finally fell, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of an overwhelming feeling she no longer dared deny. She saw the truth in his eyes, the sincerity that transcended any difference in wealth or status. His second, most significant victory was within reach. She nodded slowly, a trembling smile forming on her lips. "We'll stay." 4 weeks after that brave confrontation, the 47th floor of the Legacy Tower was a transformed place. The tense silence of before had been replaced by a hum of collaborative energy. Office doors, including Arthur's, remained almost always open. The aroma of strong coffee was still there, but now mixed with the sound of respectful conversations and, occasionally, genuine laughter. The company that operated through intimidation was becoming a model for how to treat employees with humanity. Arthur's final victory was not just retaining control of the company or exposing corruption. It was the complete metamorphosis of the corporate culture. A change that began with the simple words of a little girl. On Arthur's old mahogany desk, where he used to shout and make ruthless decisions, there was now a silver picture frame. The photo wasn't of a yacht or a business award, but of Arthur, Elena, and Lily on a picnic in the park. In the image, Arthur was on the ground making a funny face, while Lily laughed on his back, and Elena looked at the two of them with a love that illuminated her entire face. That office, once a symbol of power and solitude, had become the center of a new family. Elena no longer worked in cleaning services. With Arthur's encouragement, she had enrolled in a night management course, her potential finally recognized and nurtured. During the day, she worked in a new function created by Arthur, Employee Wellness Manager, ensuring that the dignity and respect he had learned to value were extended to every team member. The CEO, who previously measured his worth in currency, gold, and stock market quotes, now found his greatest wealth in simple moments, helping Lily with homework, hearing about Elena's day, feeling the warmth of her hand in his. He learned that true wealth could not be quantified in spreadsheets. True profitability was seeing the smile on the faces of the people he loved. The journey that began with a scream of humiliation had ended in a whisper of love. Arthur, the man who yelled at employees, learned that true leadership comes from respect, not fear. Elena, the custodian who worked in silence, discovered that her dignity was worth more than any salary, and that true love can bloom in the most unlikely places. And Lily, the girl who had the courage to face a multimillionaire, discovered a profound truth. Sometimes the most powerful adults, those surrounded by fortunes and complex businesses, are the ones who most need to be reminded about kindness by a child. She not only defended her mother, she rescued a man from his own sadness and, in doing so, transformed the destiny of hundreds of people. The confrontation that began with tears of shame ended with tears of joy, proving that courage has no age, love has no social class, and that a true and lasting transformation can begin with the simplest words spoken at the bravest moment.